friends can escape me, you're sadly mistaken. This time you won't come back.
Krillin, no! Frieza, stop this!
When Frieza blasted Krillin to a million pieces, all the while laughing at the death of a character I loved, it cemented him as the face of evil. But every great villain calls for a great hero, and as Goku's hair flashed yellow and his eyes turned white, I howled with excitement. But even after defeating Frieza, Goku chose to forgive him and let him live, teaching me a very important moral lesson. Watching Dragon Ball as a kid split the world into good and evil for me, heroes and villains, Goku and Frieza. This simplistic worldview followed me through life until my adolescence, where I was introduced to Itachi in Naruto. From the very start, he was portrayed as an evil villain who single-handedly ended his own clan. Eventually, his brother, Sasuke, set out for vengeance, and I obviously rooted for him. When he succeeded in avenging his clan, he was informed that Itachi was made to commit the crime by the village rulers, and the only reason Sasuke survived was because Itachi could not bring himself to kill his little brother. This contrast of extreme violence and deep devotion expanded my 15-year-old brain. It didn't make sense how such duality could coexist, but that wasn't enough, and I still wanted more. And in search of such characters, I found myself reading Berserk. The story started off quite standard. It was a big man wielding a ginormous sword, paired with a metal prosthetic and a missing eye cutting down every single monster, or as they're referred to in this story, apostles, that lay in his path, all the while being the most edgy person you know. It was nothing out of the ordinary until he was about to land the finishing strike on this apostle, the Count, when the sky contorted and space itself ripped open into a different dimension, a dimension not of or for this world, a dimension where demons or angels reside. And that's when I met Griffith. The story starts off with us following Guts in the Black Swordsman arc, by the end of which it is established that Guts and Griffith don't exactly see eye to eye. The moment Guts sees Griffith, his first instinct is to blow him away with a fucking arm cannon. They're not exactly friends. And then we move on to the Golden Age arc, which serves as the flashback of how Guts got here. This is where they meet for the first time.
Have you heard? Sir Griffith was awarded the title of Count. Oh yes, I heard that too. He's so handsome. I'm just jealous because he is so attractive and even more graceful than any of the women at court. Not only that, he is the greatest swordsman in the kingdom and commands the strongest army. He has far more class than those awkward nobles, and he has so much presence and elegance. Those nobles have absolutely no idea how to treat a lady. Compared to Sir Griffith, those ministers in the court are all so rough and rude. Those poor old ministers just can't hold a candle to Sir Griffith.
That's enough!
From an aesthetic standpoint, Griffith as a character stands out starkly among his peers. Even Guts, the protagonist, looks like a regular-ass dude compared to him. The moment he comes into the story, he presents himself as this otherworldly character. He is born a peasant, but he moves quickly up the ladder of military power. This sort of ascension either incurs deep adoration like that from his men and the maids, or drives people mad. Take Count Julius, for example, the general of the royal army, brother to the king whose favor is being gained by Griffith. Count Julius, a man born into nobility, born into privilege, decides that he doesn't like all the whispers of praise that Griffith, a peasant, is receiving. And after one of these whispers tell him that for the royal hunt, the king is to be escorted by Griffith and his men, the Band of the Hawk, something that is typically undertaken by the royal army. Julius concludes that the logical move now is to assassinate this broke boy. After Griffith obviously survives the attempt on his life, he decides to retaliate by sending Guts out after him. Guts succeeds in his mission, but in a moment of panic, he spears Julius' son as well, taking his life. When this news is broken to Griffith, he can't help but just grin, not a sliver of remorse on his face. But I suppose that's fair. It's the laws of the jungle, or this case, politics. You make an attempt on his life, he makes an attempt on yours. The fact that Count Julius failed where Griffith succeeded is simply a skill issue. But this pattern is repeated again when the queen herself, driven by the death of a lover, Julius, and a few other ministers come after him. He takes a little girl hostage and blackmails her father, a minister in cahoots with the queen, to help him burn his enemies to the ground. This sort of calculated brutality and violence bluntly portrays that nothing is going to stand between Griffith and his ambition. And right after this, he goes back to playing the knight in shining armor, the savior of a kingdom from a 100-year-long war. Is Griffith just playing the Game of Thrones, doing what someone in his position needs to do? Even though Julius failed in assassinating Griffith the first time, I'm sure he would try again and again until he succeeded. for he was not going to relinquish his position to an outsider like Griffith. The ministers hated him for the same reasons, and also because Griffith was not somebody they could manipulate or subdue, as he was both intelligent and wielded military might. This sort of contradiction really makes it difficult to grasp what Griffith really is. He constantly acts in contradiction with his words. Is he really the knight in shining armor? Is he a sociopath? Or is he just a pretty boy who wants to get laid in a society that's deeply homophobic? Really, a question for the ages. When Guts fights a literal demon and obviously loses, the moment he's about to be killed, Griffith comes in and risks his life to save him. After, Guts asks Griffith, why?
Tell me something. Huh? If I'm just one of your soldiers, why would you risk your life for me?
No reason in particular. Am I obliged to give you a reason every time I put myself in harm's way for your sake?
And it's not only that one instance. When Guts and Casca are stranded and under attack by over 100 men, Griffith was told he could not delegate away from the war effort to save only 2 soldiers, when he simply exclaimed that Guts and Casca were instrumental to him. All these moments serve only to paint how much Guts means to Griffith, time and again risking his life for his sake. If you ask any third person about the nature of the relationship between Guts and Griffith, they would most likely ascertain them to be friends, at the very least. This is where things get interesting, because even though Griffith's actions tell one story, his words tell another tale. During an evening with the Princess Charlotte, Griffith is asked about his friends. He refers to them as his soldiers, implying that they're beneath him. Griffith explains that they serve him for his ambition, and that his friend would be someone with his own dream, much like himself. He could never see someone serving him to be his equal. Guts hears everything Griffith had just explained. This point in the story serves as the catalyst that drives Guts to leave the Band of the Hawk, and ultimately Griffith's ruin. But why? Why did Griffith say he doesn't view Guts as his friend? I honestly think he was just trying to woo the princess with the "I'm not like them other boys" bit, and it was just unfortunate that Guts heard it too. On the other hand, it could be that Griffith had not come to terms with his feelings for Guts, as throughout the entire story he is brutally calculating, taking action not out of intuition or compassion, but through the lens of cold pragmatism. But whenever it comes to Guts, he seems to lose his cool. One of the most interesting bits of lore comes from Casca telling Guts about the time she found Griffith bathing in the river. Just some time ago, Griffith and Casca were walking across a battlefield where they ran into the lifeless body of a child with a puppet knight wedged in his hands. As Griffith crouched down to pick it up, he told the others that he had met this boy before, that the boy looked at him like he was a hero. He asked the others whether it was his fault that the boy was dead. And that's a fair question. When wars are waged, who's really responsible for the casualties? Was Iraq to be blamed for the dead American soldiers, or the senators who had stakes in all companies? A few days later, Casca finds Griffith sleeping with a noble with a disgusting reputation. The morning after, when Casca runs into Griffith bathing in the river, she asks why. For the money, as maintaining an army is quite expensive. The alternative is going to battle again. Battle where his men will die. When Casca asks,
You're thinking about that boy, aren't you, Griffith?
I'm not. I came to this conclusion rationally. Which is the lesser risk for me? Losing hundreds of my men in tens of battles? Or receiving what I need from some rich old man? Listen, Casca. I feel no responsibility to those comrades who've lost their lives in my service, because they chose to fight those battles, just as you chose, just as I.
Griffith?
Just as I have chosen this. But if there is one thing I can do for them, for the dead, it is to win, and keep winning until I attain my dream. A dream they clung to and risked their lives for.
Griffith, stop it!
I can't just step over the bones of the dead in order to realize it. My dream is already smeared with blood. I don't regret. I don't feel guilty, but I'd rather sacrifice myself than watch any more innocent children die in the name of my dream.
he is in complete denial. He feels deeply responsible for the death of the innocent and yet argues against it, saying that they chose this for themselves. He has to rationalize this as them choosing their own demise, because if he doesn't, the guilt of all his dead soldiers will crush him. The guilt is so great that he starts harming himself. He finds himself disgusting for having sold his own body, but realizing that he had to save his men, and yet he still can't accept it. This sort of paradoxical behavior is so brazen, the characters directly pointed out multiple times in the story. If Griffith is as every bit cold and cunning as he is depicted, why does he go to such lengths to protect his comrades? If he doesn't view his comrades as important or his equal, why does he feel responsible for their lives? The reason behind Griffith assassinating anyone in his path, be it the king's brother, the queen, and wooing the princess, is all a means to an end. That end being his dream, to get his own kingdom. If he fights for his nation, it is not out of duty. He does so because it will get him closer to the nobility. If he marries the princess, it is not love that compels him, but the fact that the kingdom would be his. And if he says he wants Guts, it's not out of friendship, but the mere fact that his army will be stronger with Guts in it. The moment he saw the castle, he had found his reason to live. He had found his purpose. But what if it wasn't the thing that was going to make him whole? Griffith, born into poverty, probably lived a childhood that left him wanting for food, wanting for power. Maybe when he looked around and saw all the things he didn't have as a child, he naturally deduced that if he was a king, if he had his own kingdom, he would be okay. But dreams we have as children are often marred by the realities of the road we have to take to get to them. You want to be the best boxer? You have to dedicate most of your life training, eating, and recovering. You want to be king? Well, you can just become a pretty boy who sleeps with nobles. Just as we realize that our dreams aren't all encompassing to our lives, maybe Griffith didn't want to be responsible for the lives of tens of thousands in exchange for the realization of his dream. Maybe Griffith felt that it was not his dream that would complete him, but rather it would be Guts. Griffith could let his guard down in front of Guts, conspiring with him to carry out the assassinations, and even going so far as to ask him if he thinks he's cruel. In Guts, Griffith saw an out, an escape from this unending road of bloodshed that was the path to his life-encompassing dream. Right after Griffith and the Band of the Hawk win the decisive battle for Midland, Griffith and his men are promoted to the status of nobility, with Griffith heading the royal army. This is not something that happens often. People of common birth, people born peasants, do not get to achieve such a high level of social status, especially in medieval times. Griffith is now closer than ever to his dream. Only a few more calculated moves, and he will have his own kingdom. Now he only has to woo the princess further and sow the seeds of marriage, and everything will work out as he intended. The next morning, Guts decides to leave the Band of the Hawk and Griffith behind. But it wouldn't be easy. Guts would have to fight Griffith for his freedom. Guts had previously lost to Griffith, and Casca and the others still believed in Griffith to win. Griffith, sure as ever, strikes fast, and just as his sword met his opponent's, it shattered, and with that, Guts left. Griffith cannot come to terms with his feelings. The fact that he saw a friend in Guts, someone he saw more than just a soldier, and someone he lost to, makes him feel unbelievably insecure. From the very start of the story, Griffith treats Guts differently than he treats others. He shows Guts the darker sides of his character, talking to him with an air of ease that he does not share with others, and as if life had lost all meaning, throws his plans of ascension into the fire and sleeps with the princess. Everything Griffith does is measured. He is not the type of person to act without thought, and yet when he sleeps with Charlotte, he does not even consider to leave in the cover of night, leaving him to be captured by the king's men in the morning and thrown in a cell. Griffith was at the edge of realizing all that he's wanted since he was a child, and yet he abandoned it all after Guts left him. After Griffith is saved from his captivity, it's found that his tendons were taken out, and so was his tongue. He had lost most of his muscle mass and had bits of skin missing from his body and his face. Griffith was a man of extraordinary might. He swiftly defeated Guts when they first met, Guts himself being extremely capable as a swordsman. And now he couldn't stand on his own 2 feet. Griffith was extremely charismatic. Anyone who met him felt moved by him, and now he couldn't even speak. And the worst thing that could happen to someone happened to him. He lost aura in front of his men. His men used to look at him as this otherworldly being, a man who was special, and now he was more regular than the rest of them. Incapable of moving on his own, incapable of mouthing his thoughts, incapable of being a person, Griffith would have to be cared for the rest of his life. As Casca tended to his bandages, Griffith looked at her longingly. Casca was recruited by Griffith himself after he rescued her from an attacker. From then on, Casca had been in love with Griffith, but never found that he felt the same way about her. And now, feeling like the least powerful man in the world, he makes a confused advance by falling on top of Casca. Casca, realizing this, just sits there and cries. feeling bad for him. Griffith is rejected by someone he used to view lesser than him, when before he was the apple of her eye. Now, the probable future is that his men will leave his side. Casca will probably still look after him, and if things go well, they might even have a child together. They can live in a little house where their kid runs after the dog, all the while reminiscing about the good old days, their golden age. But even in this future where things are alright, Griffith would still have to be fed by someone else, people only guessing what he could want to say. He would still be stripped of the potential man he could have been. As Griffith dreads what awaits him, he catches a glimpse of a blossoming relationship between Guts and Casca. Casca now choosing someone else over him, cementing Griffith as lesser. Griffith built his identity on being untouchable, inspiring awe in everyone, and now he was little more than a burden. Griffith, in a fever of despair, decides this cannot come to pass, and somehow musters up the strength to get the horses to move the carriage, telling himself playtime isn't over, much like when he used to, when he was a child gazing at the castle. He crashes into a river where he laughs at his broken arm, before noticing a sharp tree branch sticking out of the water. Griffith has lost everything. He is physically incapable of being whole ever again. He decides it's time to end this. He slips and falls. And as the failed attempt fills him with enough despair to drive him mad, he finds the answer to his anguish, the egg of the king. Upon picking it up, he summons the 4 members of the God Hand, the 4 angels, who ask him to sacrifice everyone he cares for in exchange for godlike power, power with which he can complete his dream. And as he is offered to be made whole again, capable of not only being a person, but a god, is it any surprise to see he made the choice he did? From the moment the Golden Age arc starts, you as the reader start wondering what the hell happened between them. How did Guts lose his eye? What happened to his arm? You keep on reading, expecting answers to these questions, and in time you fall in love with the characters. You fall in love with the story of the underdog band of mercenaries fighting their way to the top. A charismatic leader with unyielding ambition, bending the world to his will. Griffith serves as the friend Guts has been looking for. He is the savior that Casca needs. He is the man that helps hundreds of people move up in the world. So when he's swept up by the big-ass hand and asked to sacrifice everyone he cares for, his men, Casca, Guts, you tell yourself he's not going to. He couldn't, right? When Guts finally reaches him, he turns around to look at Guts in the eye, and almost as if it was a sight of Guts that damned him to decide, he says to himself,
Yes. Of the thousands of comrades and the tens of thousands of enemies, you're the only one who made me forget my dream. I sacrifice.
What ensues is one of the most violent depictions of human cruelty in fiction. Every single member of the Band of the Hawk lose their lives mercilessly. Guts runs around like a desperate dog trying to save his friends, before finally finding an unconscious Casca being dangled by the apostles. In the distance, Griffith emerges, transformed into a new being with godlike power, clad in a black exoskeleton. He comes down to greet Guts, who is now held by the apostles, and to assert himself as higher, as better, as more than anything Guts will ever be. To prove his independence, to prove his godhood, he proceeds to do the unthinkable to Casca, while Guts is forced to watch. When we meet Griffith at the start, he is summoned by the Count as one of the members of the God Hand. The Count begs the 5 angels to kill Guts, claiming that he is their common enemy. Griffith bluntly states that Guts is beneath their notice and not for them to kill. They are only here to grant the Count the power to kill Guts, for which they will require sacrifice. In response, the Count offers up Guts. The God Hand explained that to suffice as an offering, not just any flesh and blood will do. It must be someone very important to him, someone so close that it's almost like giving up a piece of yourself, like his daughter. 7 years ago, the Count was the model for a good life. He was a noble man with a beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter, but his land was riddled with pagans. Consequently, he would often be away rooting out pagan cults. And after one particularly tiring campaign, he came back home to find a group of pagans writhing in ecstasy in the worship of a pagan god. Among them, on top of the statue itself, he found his wife. In a blinding fury, he decimated each and every member of the cult, leaving only his wife. He raised a sword about to strike her when her sorrowful state stopped him, her face lacking any semblance of remorse. In his despair, he turned his sword against himself, and on the verge of death, the anguish cleaved open space itself, summoning the angels. He was told he would never know pain or suffering, and all that he would have to do was offer his wife up for sacrifice. And now he was made the same offer, but this time it would have to be his daughter. The Count, now at Guts' mercy, was faced with a dilemma: die, or lose the one thing in the world he loved, and become a being of extraordinary might. He looked at his daughters with tears running down her face, and all he could see was the family he had lost. Unable to go through with it, he died. He could not offer up his daughter, he simply loved her too much. He refused the God Hand. This part of the story serves to show us that it is possible to say no to the God Hand. The Griffith could have refused when he said yes, but could he though? One of the most heartbreaking things that we linger on is that he could have refused but he didn't. He offered all the people who loved him up for sacrifice, without even batting an eye. How could he have been so cold, so inhuman, so ruthless? How could he? We keep asking ourselves that, just as the characters do. Well, the answer is something I'm quite experienced in. When the God Hand first approached Griffith, they ask him if he's afraid of them, before venturing into his past. Griffith runs around for his friends, asking himself if they have all gone home, before moving on alone. He finds himself lost in the town, so he asks an old lady if she knows the way to the castle. The old lady says Griffith would soon follow them in the dark place. Enshrouded in darkness, Griffith calls out for his friends, when he suddenly finds himself standing on a mountain of corpses. He cries out, losing his mind at the horror of the place. He asks the old lady how could she have pointed him this way, knowing what was here. Was it a lie? She says, this is the only way to the castle. Griffith then sees the child he found on the battlefield again, telling him he wants to serve as Griffith's knight, when Griffith exclaims that he's dead. He's suddenly surrounded by all the comrades he has lost over the years, all telling him the same thing, all telling him that they would like to see his kingdom. The old lady asks, was it not you who was responsible for their death? If you hadn't wanted to go to the castle, none of this would have happened. Griffith naively says, no, I never forced anyone to come along. To which the old lady replies, just whose help do you think got you this far? You have only come this far thanks to all these corpses. You must not turn back now. If you're going to regret, you shouldn't have come here at all. Why couldn't you be satisfied just gazing at the castle? You knew what this road would be like. Griffith thinks to himself, I did know. Yes, I walked on corpses to get here. He then sees a visage of Guts asking him, isn't this part of your dream as well? She tells him to pile the corpses up. There is nothing else he can do. Griffith quietly admits, what good is regretting now? What can I say to the dead now? What good is repenting now? Griffith is shown a hyper-real memory that serves as a metaphor to his life. The God Hand show him what they want to show him, shaping his reality, even going so far as to conjure up Guts to nudge him the way they want. They show him all the comrades he has lost over the years, asking him what's the meaning of their sacrifice if he stops now. Because if he refuses the God Hand, his kingdom will never come to be. They employ the sunk cost fallacy to get him to be overcome with guilt. The old lady is revealed to be one of the God Hand members, and she accuses him relentlessly, insisting that he knew this was the price he would have to pay, stripping whatever agency the mercenaries had under Griffith, making him solely responsible for their deaths. This is Griffith at his most sympathetic. How could anyone withstand that much guilt? The weight of refusing all the people who have ever supported you, and rendering their lives meaningless by refusing the God Hand. And him refusing the God Hand wouldn't even mean the Ban of the Hawk would come out unscathed. The eclipse happens very rarely, and it's supposed to be a feast for all the apostles present. If Griffith had said no, they'd still get decimated. The only difference being, Griffith would be part of the victim list. Hell, even the egg of the king was sold to him by design. From a very young age, he was told that he would rule over a kingdom. Did Griffith even have a chance to make his own decision? Fate had ordained Griffith to betray the people he loved the most, as you can only sacrifice that which is a piece of yourself. When Frieza kills Krillin or the 1,000 other innocents, it's evil and it's cruel, but that is what is expected of him. He is the villain from the start up until the end. And when Goku beats him, it's hype, but also that's what's expected of him. He is the hero of the story. We grow up idealizing heroes, hearing of Alexander the Great conquering most of the known world, Genghis Khan holding the largest empire to have ever existed, or George Washington, who helped found the most powerful country on the planet. All people you aspire to be when you're little, the greatness so far and above anything you've ever seen. But as you grow up, you understand more about the world, the complexities of people, the different shades of good and evil. The mere thought of the amount of bloodshed and downright cruelty that went into forging the nations of your heroes is genuinely harrowing, leaving you little sense of right and wrong. Your heroes are torn down from their pedestal and painted a very ugly shade of humanity. Griffith's betrayal hurts because it's almost a metaphor of that experience. Frieza is supposed to hurt you. He's a villain after all. But your heroes aren't, and that's why it stings like hell. Griffith was the one person everyone depended on and looked up to. So when he betrays Guts, Casca, and the Band of the Hawk so intimately, how could it not reopen the wound? How could you ever forget that pain?